You ever had the thing happen where something is starting to go really, really well in your life? Business, relationship, being a part of an organization, making something, whatever it might be. And everything seems to be arrow pointing up and you feel real good about it. And then for no apparent reason and with very little warning, the wheels just fall off. There's some little hint of this in the air. And you're like, what, is that a big deal? Should I be paying attention to that little warning light? And then boom, stuff completely collapses, and it's embarrassing, discouraging, heartbreaking, whatever it might be. And then a little bit of time goes by, and time heals all wounds, or a lot of them, or at least helps a little bit. And you muster some courage to try some stuff again, and it starts to go well again, and the arrow starts to point up a little bit for you again. And then you run into the scenario that you ran into last time. You run into the test you weren't able to pass last time, the hurdle you weren't able to clear last time. And have you ever had that happen and this little thing pops into your brain, even though everything's probably going to be fine, this little thing pops into your brain. It's like, you do not have what it takes to clear this hurdle or pass this test. You are not made of stern enough metal to get this thing done. And then all of a sudden you start thinking, oh no, here we go again. Here we go again. This is the thing. This is what I can't do. And then maybe sometimes it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and you screw the thing up again, or you trip over the same thing again. That kind of cycle can lead to really meaningful discouragement. And it's that seed of doubt that can get into your head and just live there forever. And every time you get close to conquering this thing you want to conquer, doing the next thing you want to do with your life, boom, that little bit of self-doubt or insecurity or whatever you want to call it crops back up. I hope that's normal for most people, because this happens for me, these narratives that live in my head. But have you ever had the thing happen where you go through all of that exact cycle and you get to the point on your second time around where you start thinking, oh no, here we go again. This is the thing. This is what got me last time, except this time you clear the hurdle. Is that not the most liberating, exciting, rewrite the narrative, wow, the world is wide open to me, there's no telling where things could go, optimistic, awesome feeling in the world? Okay, hopefully you've experienced that one too, because I've got that one a few times. The narrative breaker is a very powerful life experience, and it's one of my favorite life experiences, frankly, because it means I didn't Mary Sue the situation. I didn't just show up and be good at everything. I fell on my face a few times, and then I overcame a story that it felt like was written in stone. If you have ever experienced anything like that, or you know someone who has walked through things like that, then I think you're really going to relate to what happens in Act 3 of the building of the temple story in the first half of the book of Ezra. In Act 1, God and the king of everything is on the side of the Jewish exiles returning to rebuild the temple. Everything just goes great, even though not a lot of people comparatively sign up to be a part of the quest. That's okay. If anything, that makes it even awesomer. In Act 2, you start to hit some speed bumps, and then by the end of Act 2, things get really bad. The Jewish exiles returning to rebuild the temple fail the test. They stop building. They get outfoxed and outmaneuvered by people who are far more knowledgeable of and sophisticated in the ways of political intrigue and deception and manipulation. And they go behind the back of Zerubbabel and the Jewish exiles returning to rebuild the temple and completely shipwreck the rebuilding process. They fail this test. And then they go dormant through the end of Act 2 and on into Act 3 with nothing happening for well over a decade. No rebuilding, this life discouragement just lingering there, nagging at them about their failure and about their inability when it mattered the most to have what it takes to pass the test. But now there's an awakening that happens here at the beginning of Act 3 with Haggai and Zechariah being sent by God to slap the slumped over slouching king out of his slumber, to get him to get his sword and his trowel back out and get to work on finishing off that temple. And now we get to the part in Act 3 where we're either going to fall victim to this narrative that can never be defeated. It's written in stone. Or this time around, Zerubbabel and the exiles rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem are going to pass the test and move into uncharted territory. We get the here we go again moment in Ezra chapter 5, verse 3, with an inquiry from the governor of Trans-Euphrates. It's one of the satrapies that the Persian Empire was divided up into under the leadership of King Darius, who is not really the second king of the Achaemenid Empire. It really technically goes Cyrus the Great, his son Cambyses, his younger son Bardia, who reigned only very briefly, and then Darius. But Cambyses and Bardia, it was real rocky. There was sort of a succession crisis that occurred there. So in a lot of ways, you can sort of think of Darius as the next big, meaningful king of the Persian Empire. And so this Tetanai guy writes from out in Jerusalem or near Jerusalem back home to the home office to King Darius and says, there's a question here about this rebuilding project that was suspended by one of your people groups in Jerusalem. It looked like it was going to be a non-issue, like this was just going to go away and take care of itself. But, oh, great king, now they're building things again, and I don't know if that's supposed to be happening. Could you please advise, oh great King Darius, one way or the other as to what you want me to do with these people? And so this is one of the places where we get some official court records as an aside in the text. In Ezra 5, we get this whole really interesting, surprisingly even-handed letter from this Tetanai fellow who inquires of the king and says, all right, well, whatever you want to do, and then let the king send us his decision in the matter. And I think the fact that it's an even-handed letter is really worth noting, because I think that demonstrates an invisible maturing process that has happened on the other side of this equation amongst Zerubbabel and his people. Somehow, he's managed to demonstrate skills similar to that of Queen Esther, to curry favor and understand the relationships that need to happen in a way that's a little more sophisticated than it looks like they must have been doing it 10 or 15 years earlier. Now, somehow this relationship is good enough that Tetanai is willing to faithfully recount to Darius the plea of Zerubbabel and the Jewish exiles who are rebuilding the temple in a way that is fair-minded. I don't think that's just a product of Tetanai's good character. I think that's also a product of growth on the part of Zerubbabel and the Jewish exiles rebuilding the temple. And I think it's also a product of the providence of God, something that is more clearly spelled out in this era in the book of Esther, but something that I don't think you have to read too close between the lines right here in Ezra 5 and Ezra 6 to see it playing out as well. So this letter gets sent with all three of these positive forces in the background: Tetanai's decent character, the growth arc of Zerubbabel and the Jews rebuilding the temple, and the providence of God. And in chapter 6, King Darius gets the letter. And apparently the letter hits him on a good day. Again, that's a theme that comes up in the book of Esther. Esther is going to catch Xerxes, Darius's son, on a good day. And of course, the original audience knew that kings were temperamental and had a lot of pressure, and so catching them on a good day was very important, and there would be a sigh of relief as the original audience read this, realizing that in Ezra 6:1 it says, King Darius then issued an order, and they searched in the archives stored in the treasury at Babylon. This is a huge win, that he didn't just crumple the thing up and throw it away. He's taking it seriously. And when I say that the providence of God is on display in King Darius's positive reply, that has a lot to do with a whole lot of history that we talked about in the first 42 episodes of the previous season on the Book of Esther, involving the means by which Darius became king. Without getting into all of it again, it was a little bit tricky, and he really had to scrap his whole life to defend his credibility and his account of how he, a familial outsider to the line of Cyrus, became the great king of kings. Well, as a result of that, he was always very keen on agreeing with Cyrus and upholding the rulings of Cyrus from the past, and expressing his expectation that future rulers would do the same with him. So there's a certain regal shrewdness and self-serving interest here on the part of Darius as well. But in another part of the Bible, it says that God moves the hearts of kings like a watercourse, and all of those things that happen historically that just look like the political comings and goings of history, the normal stuff, Well, the Bible holds those things out as being something that God has the full ability to move around like pieces on a chessboard to accomplish the things that he wants to accomplish in the grand redemptive narrative of history. Okay, we're almost done with Act 3 here, but I think we need to look at how this decree, the search from Darius, works out and how that plays out with the completion of the temple. So we'll tackle all of that and talk about how it sets things up for Nehemiah next time around. Final thought. I'm just going to get a little bit oddly personal for just a second. This is normally what we do around here, but this has been on my mind, and so just here it is. I think it's perfectly fair and reasonable to look at stories like this and be encouraged by the characters, the very flawed characters that we see in the Bible, as we see them go through stuff that is similar to us and overcome it. It doesn't have to be the central point or message of the text. I don't think Zerubbabel's growth arc is the central point of this text in Ezra at all, but I find it relatable, and I think it's okay to just pause from time to time and note that and be like, hey, yeah, other people have walked through this, other people who were even interested in trying to understand who God is and do things in their lives that would be honoring to God or the right thing to do. And then the other people in the past have failed tests, and then they run into that test later on, and maybe by the grace of God, they pass that test. And maybe the narratives that sometimes we imagine are written in stone in our lives aren't actually quite as written in stone as we might imagine. Again, maybe not the central point of the text, but that just kind of popped for me today, and it's been on my mind a little bit. All right, that's all I got for today. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.